I told myself that I was going to be the best person to execute on LinkedIn in the world. So I've posted definitely the most video content of anyone in the world on this platform in the past 5 years. You need to have a mindset of, I am going to be really good at this.
How would you articulate the opportunity that exists for B2B companies with LinkedIn?
And it's the number one opportunity for a company to grow and scale their revenue at the most efficient cost. By far the number one opportunity when you look at the other things that you could do.
Hey, welcome everybody. This is going to be a really fun one today. I'm really excited to have everybody here. The premise, the context for all of this and where everybody saw this was LinkedIn. So what we're really going to do today with Chris, and we'll give a little intro here momentarily, is a LinkedIn masterclass, really in effect. And Chris is obviously, one of very few people in the world that have executed at the level that he has over the last 5 years. And the LinkedIn algorithm, the LinkedIn execution, the LinkedIn strategy, all of that is evolving. It's not one static thing that we can just set it and forget it. And so what we're going to dive into today with Chris is what has worked in the past, what his journey has been to, get to the LinkedIn momentum that he has, and then what's working now and what he's thinking about in the future. And I'll have some thoughts that I'll share as well along the way. And anybody who has questions, feel free to put those in the chat. We can carve some time for the end of this to answer anybody's questions that, they have and they'd like to ask directly. So just for a little bit of context for everybody, my name is Eric Jacobson. I run a company called Hatch. We handle all of Chris's podcast and video content, a lot of which you see on his LinkedIn. And so we can talk a lot about like the video side for LinkedIn. We've got a lot of strategies and playbooks for that. And then, Chris, maybe if you want to start, just like give a little intro on your journey, maybe just as like that highest level context of, starting on LinkedIn and what has transpired over the last, 5 years, and just a quick little overview.
Yeah, what's up, everyone? Good to have you all here. In 2019, when I transitioned from being an in-house employee into starting my one-person consulting firm in my living room in April of 2019, I had a bunch of student loan debt. I had basically no money in my bank account. I had a lot of experience and I spent a lot of time working to try and set me up for that moment. In August of 2019, I told myself that I was going to be the best person to execute on LinkedIn in the world. And I think that if you look at the progression over the past 5 years, I've posted more content, definitely the most video content of anyone in the world on this platform in the past 5 years. And I just took that mindset, and whether you actually are the best or not doesn't matter. You need to have a mindset of, I am going to be really good at this, and then make it happen. And so I've been really committed to the channel. A combination of a lot of things have fundamentally changed my life in terms of my net worth and the amount of money that I have in my bank account, the amount of people that know me, the amount of partnerships that I establish, the amount of people that I've been able to help through, whether it's my consulting companies or just helping them through content. It has fundamentally changed my life. And you can look at it of, I'm a personal brand that has figured out really good ways to monetize the brand, but I actually think it's the other way around, that I'm a really good business person that has figured out how to use LinkedIn to deliver business results.
I think that's a really important delineation but between the two. And I think what we can do too now is just like give an idea of the opportunity that exists for LinkedIn. So you saw this early. You saw this in 2019, 5 years ago. I think the opportunity is becoming more evident to a lot more B2B companies today, but I still think there's some that are sort of like either, planning to do it in the future, dipping a toe in, still a little bit of hesitation there. So how would you articulate the opportunity that exists for B2B companies with LinkedIn? How would you have them think about that?
It's the number one opportunity for you individually as a professional to grow your income, status, whatever's important to you. And it's the number one opportunity for a company to grow and scale their revenue at the most efficient cost. It's by far the number one opportunity when you look at the other things that you could do. As an individual, what else can you do? Make your resume better, join a private community, take a course, like buy somebody's course. The number one way is delivering expertise so that people know that you're an expert in something so that they want to either hire you or pay you money to help them as a side hustle or hire your business. By far the most opportunity as an individual. And then as a company, what are your other options? Spend $500,000 to go build another trade show booth, your seventh of this year, dump $10,000 more a month into Google Ads when you already spend $200,000 a month. The other things that you can do as a B2B company, the cost relative to the impact, just there's nowhere near a match that you get of the low cost of executing on LinkedIn combined with the really high upside.
Totally. And one way we can look at this too, just like quantitatively, is the supply and the demand. So LinkedIn has 1 billion users. Obviously, not all of those are, monthly active users, but there's hundreds of millions of monthly active users. 16% of LinkedIn's users log in daily, but only 1% post weekly. So just inherent in that is a massive opportunity on the demand side for people logging in daily to read and consume content, with the small amount of people who are actually posting, and that's just weekly, let alone, posting daily, 3 times a week, what have you. And the same thing exists for monthly. 48% of LinkedIn's user base logs into the platform monthly, but only 7% of LinkedIn's users post something every 3 months. So literally just by nature of looking at the supply and demand mismatch, there's a massive opportunity right off the gate. And that's not even talking about, let alone, which we're going to get into, effective strategy on it, like the formats and making sure you're creating content that resonates. That's literally just, the need for content that LinkedIn has on the platform. I think there's probably 3 ways we can look at this, and we can kind of start going through this tactically. How to look at the overall goal with a LinkedIn strategy. So there's many ways you can look at this, and we can get into that. Leading indicators, lagging indicators, ultimately pipeline revenue, things like that. Then number 2 would be the content and creative strategy. So like, to me, this is most important, is how are we creating content that people actually want to consume, and you do build the audience and affinity and trust and ultimately business results. And then there's the platform tactics. And this is where like a lot of people can get in the weeds, and they are important, but it's like how the algorithm is working. How can we, take advantage of the moment in time of certain things that are working better than others on LinkedIn. So I think it'd be good to touch on each of those. Maybe first though, let's start with the goals. How do you look at setting the correct goals when you set out and right now for your LinkedIn strategy, whether it's impressions, followers, DM conversations, attributable, self-reported attributions, like any way you look at that? Because like if we don't set that correctly, either we're not going to see that it's working when it is, because we're not actually measuring the correct thing, and we can think that it's not working, and we stop the investment, or we don't go full into it. So yeah, how do you look at that?
Philosophically, the goal is become the number one consultant for your target customer, the number one free consultant for your target customer. And when you separate the idea of the content from the distribution, and you realize that what you're saying actually needs to be right before you care about hashtags, post times, a thoughtful hook, things like that, what you're saying originally needs to be impactful to somebody as step one. Back in 2000, and I've just repeated this exact cycle for different target customer or different person. I'm doing it right now for people that are trying to do content or founder brand. You can see this playing out in Meta right this second. But at the beginning, I would just take free consulting calls for people that wanted help with Facebook ads in 2019. And I would take a call, answer their questions, record my side, post those things, and then other people that needed help with Facebook ads would see that content and think it was valuable. And then I elevated to the demand gen director, and then I started talking to the CMO, and now I'm talking to the CEO and the CFO, and I have stuff sprinkled in for other stakeholders. And so I've just repeated the same cycle, but communicating different problems to different stakeholders So you're seeing that play out right here and a lot of other things that I've done. And when you get that part right, like when you sit on a call with somebody that fits the exact way of your target customer and you actually deliver unique, specific value to them, that when you put that content onto LinkedIn, that you have so much more confidence and validation that this information is good and that people that are like the person that you helped would also find it valuable. That is honestly the missing part of most LinkedIn content strategies. I think that most people produce content of what they hope people care about, or companies especially produce content for what they hope their target customer cares about, not what their customer actually cares about. And so this process of just being a free consultant or being the best consultant just allows you to help your target customer in whatever way that they need, rather than trying to force the way that you help them into, here's how you buy my product.
And I think it leads to the effectiveness of the content being high because it's first person related based on your specific data, examples, things you've helped people with specifically that you can talk about. And this is a lot of how you've written your content and posted your content over the years is either, proprietary data you have either from Refine Labs, Paceto, things like that, and then baking that into, what people can do with that information.
And then when you do that for a period of time, you see patterns of this. People ask this same exact question 10 times. Or when I ask them what their performance is, this is how they measure the performance every time. And this is why it doesn't work. So once you do them over a period of time, you not only get the sample size of this is what happened with the one person, you see, 10 people all struggle with this one thing. And they're all trying to fix it in this way. And it doesn't work because of this thing. And I can introduce a new solution that solves this issue for all 10 people. So there's the one of having the one-off, but through the process, you see patterns that give you insights on the state of the larger market. And then at that point, you can shift it more into like, not a, here's how I help this one person, but here's an issue that a lot of people are facing. And you can see that open up a little bit. I'm kind of in that process right now with Paceto. I've been like in this game officially for 8 months, and I'm starting to see the patterns, and I'm starting to elevate those patterns into clear market problems. And so if you watch closely in what I'm doing, I'm basically repeating the same cycle that I did in 2019, but doing it again now with a different product, different problem, different customer. And so you can see the early stage progression of what's happening as I go through this again.
Through that process, how much of a factor do you think, or do you look at other people creating quote unquote similar content for a similar ICP or persona in order to ensure yours is differentiated? Or do you solely focus on your understanding of the problem and the persona and your customer and your clients in a way that content creation cycle, is resolving something for them or helping them, rather than contextualizing it against what other people are posting, in a similar category as you, like the competitive environment, essentially? How do you look at that?
So what matters at the core is that you're right, that you're not just like that. You see the customer problem and that you are assessing it accurately. And the path that you get there by going in with 50 companies and consulting them, understanding their issues, working as part of the customer success team at your company to actually solve that issue, that level of detail almost inevitably leads you to a different point of view. The process actually creates an opinion that nobody else has. So if you look back to my content from a year ago, before I had gone through this process, you would see that my content, like people were starting, it wasn't that differentiated. And if you look at the stuff that I'm posting over the past 2 months, like I've been in the work, I've changed stakeholders, I'm seeing the data. And at this point now, I know that I have a differentiated perspective. The goal isn't to just look at what other people are saying and say something different. The goal is to understand the problem better than anybody else and then be able to communicate it differently. For instance, like a lot of people still believe that the biggest problem is related to attribution. And so people will think, oh, I can't measure this or I can't. But if you look higher level in the org, the problem is actually the company's key performance indicators around their go-to-market. That's the problem. And so people are consistently trying to solve for attribution and doesn't actually fix the problem. And so that's something that over the past 6 months, as I've gotten into the work, I've started to see that other people don't see, which creates a differentiated perspective.
Such a good way to put it. And what other factors, as you're going through this process of dialing in the content so that it resonates and it's effective outside of the platform tactics, the content itself, do you work on, do you think about, like, what are those other factors that you think are really important?
Like, repetition matters. I've done, I don't know, 600 of these podcast episodes. Obviously, I'm a little bit better than I was in episode 3. And so repetition really matters if you want to be the spokesperson, host, dare I say, like, star of your podcast. That, like, practicing really does make an impact. I think that there's a balance between getting up here and talking about the things that you know, and then being in the work and learning more things and challenging the things that you know and trying to stretch it further, and making sure that you have both, that you're not just sitting over here talking about the things that you did 5 years ago, that you're actively studying your craft and delivering net new insights around it, I think is also really important.
And with repetition, one of the things that you've done and done really well, and I think it really drives the effectiveness of becoming known for something, is the repetition of essentially like championing the problem or a solution, which is a single concept usually, or, you know, a few concepts, but repeating that many, 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 many times over many months and years in different ways, different examples, different styles. How important do you think that is? Like, or what do you look at with that? Because, like, you know, there's two sides of the equation there, like the perception of audience fatigue, but then you've also got to accommodate for your goal, which is to acquire new audience members who are the right people and relevant people. And maybe they haven't heard that message, so now they're hearing it for the first time, but you've also got people who are following you for the last 2 years. And so you're kind of like trying to, you know, cater to both. So what's your thinking around that?
I was on a podcast before this earlier, and the person like introed me as being this person that has like tons of polarizing perspectives and like hot takes and things like that. And I laughed at it. I don't believe that any of the things that I'm saying are polarizing or hot takes. I think that they are different than what common people believe that read the headlines or listen to Gartner. I do believe that my thinking is different than that, but I don't believe my thinking is polarizing. I don't think pointing out the flaws in how companies use attribution and seeing the same problem at hundreds of companies and talking about it is polarizing. I'm also not telling you, to be clear, I'm not telling people not to use attribution. I'm just communicating the problems and how people use it today. I think that when you're in my seat, a lot of people will take the things that you say out of context. Recently, I talked about the flaws of using surveys to create benchmarks. And I think that there are a lot of flaws in getting your benchmark data around how you spend hundreds of millions of dollars from a survey. I think there's a lot of flaws in that. And I pointed those things out. It doesn't mean that the people that do that are bad people. It doesn't mean that I'm shitting on the vendors that do it that way. I'm just pointing out to you as a consultant the risks in using those things. When you're actually in solving things for customers and you see the outcomes, there's a level of conviction that gets you past those things. Like, I don't see my stance as polarizing at all. To get on the topic of audience fatigue, the emergence of thought leadership ads, I think, is a really interesting dynamic that changes the game here, because you can go and use paid thought leadership ads to get in front of your exact new audience with effectively organic content that gets boosted. I think that that's a really powerful thing that wasn't available to me or anyone else 2 or 3 years ago. When you think about like banging the drum on a concept for a long time, that you feel like everybody sees this concept a million times and is so bored of it and like, come on. But in reality, the only person that gets bored of it is you.
And how have you not gotten bored? I think that is so key to this, is like,
you do. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and be like, oh, I've never, like that message about creating demand that I pushed for 2.5 years. Like, I am bored of that narrative. I am. And so like and being able to evolve to the next level and start looking at the finance element of it and recreate the narrative and reinvent yourself as a professional is something that you need to do. You can't do the same things as a marketing manager that you if you want to be a CMO. And it's the same thing when it comes to your own personal growth and development. Like the things that you talk about in your content will be different if you're a marketing manager or a CMO, and being able to evolve and elevate the things that you talk about, I think are really important.
I think something really important though in that note is that you didn't get bored of it at month 2 and then start trying to switch to a new narrative and you were 2.5 years in to that message. And I think that's one of those things where it's easy to think that, it's that fatigue is setting in too early in the process when you're actually trying to champion that narrative, and you need the time for that to play out. Like you guessed it, on probably hundreds of podcasts championing that narrative for a while. You posted hundreds of LinkedIn posts championing that narrative. You're not switching things up every, 2-3 months. Like these are long arcs that are taking place essentially.
Yeah. And the only time to consider, and I'm not even sure you'd consider shifting at this point, but like it's a good barometer of if you're successful here. Like almost all of your sales calls should start with, I was listening to your content and like I was, listening to episode 137 about the MQL hamster wheel, and I'm on the MQL hamster wheel. When like a high percentage of your sales calls start with your customer talking about the problem in your language or how you frame it in the content, that's the ultimate North Star.
Yep.
It's not only that people are seeing your stuff, it's that they're consuming the stuff and that they're adopting the information in their own minds. Yeah.
And to put a wrap on that, so that is such a good framework for knowing if it's working. Is the audience repeating it back to you, or sales conversations getting started and repeating it back to you without prompting from you? And so one final question on this sort of section, and then I'd love to get into like your actual process, like your posting process, sitting down, writing. I know you've got recording blocks each week, and then you've got media that gets created for you. And then, how you actually go through tactically and do the posting, and what your cadence is for that.
If we want to talk algorithm at some point too, I'm happy to share, because some dynamics are changing there as well.
Totally.
It's new stuff.
So people repeating it back to you, seeing that pop up in sales conversations, things like that. What other measurement, metrics do you think people should look at if to say LinkedIn is directionally working for us, or it's really working for us, or, what have you, between impressions, followers, inbound DM conversations, any of those that you think are important to track? And if so, why?
To like sort of level set the playing field, I am a huge advocate for measuring all of your marketing programs against the same core structure. And so you might like lean on attribution more for one channel and, influenced revenue for other things. And you might have different, but at the core, we have a program that costs a certain amount of money and produces an estimated amount of results. And in that delta, you get a return on an investment. And so for companies that spend a lot of money on Google Ads, they might be lucky to spend $1 and get 75 cents back in revenue. Maybe some companies spend $1 and get 25 cents back in revenue. And so when you look, and then trade show conferences could actually be like almost as bad. And so when you look at that, and then you look at the link, and the reason that those are the way they are, a lot has to do with how high the cost is to run and play in that channel. When you think about a LinkedIn organic strategy, or even putting thought leadership ads, the actual cost to run the program is dramatically lower than big paid media or event strategies. So you take one side of the equation and you take it way down, and it creates a big advantage. And then additionally, you can get a lot of upside on LinkedIn. And so the delta on the actual ROI of the channel, and this is the reason why I push it as like the biggest opportunity in B2B, is because the ROI delta is so high. And so at a high level, like the way that I look at it, and I'm the CEO of, multiple companies, and I look at it as the impact on also our customers as well. To me, it doesn't have to be so, I think people make it way too complicated in how they go about it. Are we getting inbound DMs from LinkedIn? Are we using LinkedIn to deliver outbound messages and get meetings? Are we using LinkedIn to run thought leadership ads that are then getting new people into our audience or getting new people into our pipeline? Are we using LinkedIn for retargeting or active in pipeline deals? Like, it's hard to just isolate LinkedIn and say, because LinkedIn had self-reported attribution, that's why it's working. It's such a dynamic channel that you can use across the entire customer lifecycle. Like, you could make arguments that my LinkedIn stuff is actually most effective when deals are on the 1 yard line. When like I have a deal that's stalled and I post a piece of content that's exactly relevant to that company, and somebody in their company sees it and pulls the trigger and closes their $200,000 a year deal that I'm selling them, and that post had nothing to do with pipeline production, is not going to show up in any attribution from an organic post, and makes a really big impact. You could make an argument that LinkedIn makes a big impact on customer renewals and how a customer expands with you and how they evangelize. And so I just don't like the idea of putting LinkedIn in a box. And I think that people, because of how they think about the measuring against the marketing, oftentimes lose the bigger picture, where like a proper use of LinkedIn is a full go-to-market strategy across account management, customer success, sales, marketing, leadership. And I think that we need to be thinking about that not only for pipeline production, but across the whole life cycle.
Yeah, Chris, let's get into the algorithm a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you're seeing with that right now. Obviously, there's a bit of a black box to it, but by nature of just posting so much, being so active on it, you can pick up a bit about what's working, what the trends are, and what you're feeling is most effective from that standpoint. So yeah, where do you think it is today as we sit here?
The most interesting recent development is the beta release of the dedicated video feed. Think like TikTok scroll on LinkedIn. I will say that LinkedIn has tried to push features for the past 5 years that haven't stuck. They tried to push stories. They tried to push like audio spaces, and neither of them really caught traction. I think part of it is how they incentivize and prioritize the use of new features. I think that LinkedIn doesn't have the full social media DNA in their company yet, like an Instagram or a TikTok does. But this new release of this feature, if being able to keep traction, like have traction, is incredibly meaningful because it changes it from a text-first environment like Twitter X, and it moves it to a video-first environment like TikTok, or even Instagram has moved to that as the primary feature, primary delivery. And so when that shift happens, typically a social network would say, okay, we're going all in on the video feed. Therefore, we're going to artificially boost all of the video stuff so that more people see that and post video and things like that. And they artificially shift the dynamics of the channel. That's how Instagram has been really successful in the adoption of stories and the adoption of reels, is because they game the algorithm to get you to want to do that thing by giving you a bunch of organic reach on a new way to use the channel. So LinkedIn hasn't done that fully yet. But if this moves out of beta, and if they are able to get that and it moves to a video first platform, then video is then going to get a dramatic increase in visibility relative to the rest of the content. Another really interesting thing, if you think about how TikTok works, is that sometimes TikTok, for the first video they introduce you from somebody new in the For You section, that they'll pull a video from somebody from 2023, from like 12 months ago, and use that one as the way to test whether or not you're going to engage with that. And then if you do, then they're going to start showing you other videos. And so having a larger library of videos that you've posted on TikTok becomes a huge advantage, because you have way more videos that can get introduced into somebody's new feed. LinkedIn has never played that way in the past. The like archive of the content has never been a priority for them, and the half-life of content is relatively low, where now like I'm getting engagement on videos that I posted 3 years ago that are showing up through that feed. And so if LinkedIn really does adopt like a more TikTok style thing and they can get users to move, it will fundamentally change how this platform is used. The AI ghostwriter people that are paying $2,000 a month to have somebody regurgitate bullshit, that type of stuff is going to go away. The AI written text posts and things like that. And it's good if it moves to video, it's going to fundamentally change the platform. So that's the thing that I'm like most excited about. I've been telling LinkedIn to do this for almost 5 years now. As you see other platforms just move so much on mobile first, video first, vertical video, that you'd figure at some point LinkedIn would follow suit or had to follow suit. And so here it is. We'll see if they can make the feature stick.
Totally agree with all that. I can share a little bit of insight from what we're seeing with that as well. So for those who aren't aware entirely of it, this is in beta. It's out to a lot of people. It seems to be mostly US users right now. I currently do not have it on my own personal LinkedIn, but I'm posting vertical video way more now, and almost every single one of the vertical videos that I'm posting and those that our customers are posting are getting 5, 10, 15, 20x the impressions of a normal text-based post or a normal square or horizontal video. They are kind of doing that engine that Chris, you just described, of like pushing through, more impressions to early adopters of the format that they need. They need that format right now to seed the video feed. I'm also seeing exactly what you just described as well. Videos from the archives are now surpassing even like the new videos, just from, that cycle basically of basically recycling in those archived videos into the feed. And so the library of content is actually really important now as well. It's still TBD on like how accurate the algorithm is to like those impressions being relevant to the exact ICP that you normally, have consuming your content and stuff like that. But it's still really early days. So I think it's really important to try to lean into that, because there's moments in time on all social platforms where the demand supply thing works in your favor. That still exists for LinkedIn overall, but especially for video, in my opinion, this is a massive moment in time right now, where if you can adapt and lean into this, as we mentioned, very few people are posting on LinkedIn, far fewer are posting video, and far fewer are posting vertical video for the new video feed. And so I think it's a really good moment in time right now, as far as social platforms go, to build up an audience using that. What does your posting day to day, week to week look like? Like, from a practical standpoint, how do you approach that?
Yeah, people think that this is like so buttoned up and there's a bunch of automation and I do all my stuff in one day and then I schedule it out. And when you hear how it works, like I think it might feel like too simple, and maybe you need something else, but this works for me. I set a block of time on Tuesdays where I record all the content. We're in that block right now. Historically, it's been 3 hours, so I can do 3 1-hour podcasts and events in a row. And then I have those 3 podcasts and the cut up content for the next week. At this point, this will be my last week where I do 3 of them, and I'm going down to maximum of 2 per day and going to try to make a higher quality content rather than more quantity. So I'm going to test that assumption. And then every single morning from 7:30 to 8 a.m. Central Time, I just have a block of time. I get to my desk. It's the first thing that I do from a work perspective. Hatch will go and edit all that stuff. They'll create a Word document with all these different video links, and then I'll be able to go in, look at the videos, find one that I'm compelled to do, write the copy for it in a like Google Doc right there, upload the video, copy the text in, put the hashtags, and post it by 8 a.m. So I have a 30-minute like content distribution block on LinkedIn every single morning, Monday through Friday. Do things happen where like yesterday I had a bunch of stuff going on and I didn't post? Yeah. The misses of my posting have grown. At the beginning, for the first 2 years, I don't think I missed a day. Like I would sit there for 2 hours if needed and be able to get a post out, where at this point I'm just like a busier entrepreneur and can't sit there for 2 hours. I have obligations with meetings and team and other things like that. So it changes now. But at the beginning, I was so dedicated to every single day, Monday through Friday. So that's how I think about my post cadence, all in on content. I'm probably spending, if you exclude like walking to the bathroom and commenting on or responding to some comments or changing meetings and responding to comments, I probably spend 5 hours a week, maybe 6 hours a week on content creation and distribution in total.
That's one of those things where especially starting out, like for me, even myself, like starting out, you're going to spend way more time figuring it all out, dialing it all in, and then finding your rhythm with it to get it down to the efficiency that you have it at now. And I think that's normal. I think it's probably good to think of it like not in the beginning, as you're going to be as dialed in as being able to bang out a really good post in 30 minutes. It might take you 2-3 hours to like write that up. But I think the reps, like quality through quantity, to me is like a real thing. Like you're going to find your quality just by the quantity, the sheer output of volume to dial in your voice, your process, how quickly you can do these things. I really like you sharing that there's no like all these platforms, scheduling tools, automation, AI writing assistants,
Ghostwriters, AI,
ghostwriters.
none of that stuff.
Yep, exactly. All right, cool. Let's bring up a few people. Megan had a good question around the company page versus the founder led personal brand style or other thought leaders at the company, which I know you've got a lot of experience with.
That was basically it. I was curious about your thoughts on having kind of multiple personalities posting through a brand page versus, you know, I think for us, it would mostly be like the sales team talking about some of those conversations that they're having directly with prospects and clients. But I'm curious on your perspective about that, or if there's a way into either. Probably should be doing both, but curious on your perspective.
This is different for every individual platform. So if you go to TikTok, for instance, and you set up a page for your company and you post content, you're not going to get dinged compared to a personal profile, like if you did the same thing on LinkedIn. That on LinkedIn, for whatever reason, they set up the algorithm that way, or I don't exactly know, that the opportunity and the upside between a personal page and a company page, there's a big gap there. Back in 2015 on Facebook, like a company page would work better than a personal page. And so like every single platform will be different. When we talk about LinkedIn today, company pages are at a disadvantage for whatever reason. It's just very clear that that's the way that it is. And you can have a company page, and there's many that have 100,000 followers in their company page and post content and get 5 likes, and all 5 of them are employees of the company. And it literally nobody that matters saw that post. And they're literally just going through like $100 million company, just going through the motions, posting about their like Arbor Day celebration and some like employee award that somebody won. And they're just going through and PRing themselves, and nobody cares. I think that you have to go as the primary channel through personal profiles. Personal profiles come at disadvantages. Like as the CEO founder of multiple companies, I've realized that having your brand tied to the company brand so closely is actually a negative thing. That you want association and things like that, but you don't want to be so tied to it. That if you're a company and your chief product officer who has 0.5% of shares that have been diluted, and all of a sudden they have hundreds of thousands of followers and are driving a bunch of business for your developer audience, and they say, hey, I'm providing way more value than my $250,000 salary in these peanuts of stock options. Like, I want you to pay up. And so all of a sudden somebody, your company has a lot of leverage over you. There are downsides to the personal profile route. And the way that you mitigate that as a business is to go through multiple personal profiles and then use the company page as the one that just is pushing out the successful content of all those things. And you're just kind of like the DJ. You're mixing the songs of the personal profiles into one feed. So I think that the answer for a developed company is to do both. But to think about the company one more as a collection of content, and to think about the company one being a lot more effective in paid distribution than organic distribution.
Awesome. Great stuff. More, you had a few questions if you want to come up and ask one or two of those.
What's up, Chris?
Hey.
So very specific question to me, and maybe it'll address some people's questions, but I sell like sales coaching, consulting services for account executives and companies. So two buyer personas. Should the narrative of my content be focused on sales tips and advice through like my point of view, my lens, like through the conversations I'm having with my clients or even like prospects? My like content on LinkedIn has been like up and down. Like I'll have like one day my content will do really well, and then like it tanks the other day. That's the question.
run it back to me one time. The key points, you have two different buyer personas.
Two buyer personas, they sort of live under the same umbrella: account executives and let's call it like SaaS companies, like sales leaders or CEOs of companies, but it's all sales content related. Specifically SMB. Like I'm going to that niche more because that's what I know and that's what I've been playing with a lot.
SMB, high velocity sales, right? Or you sell to small companies?
No, SMB, high velocity sales.
Yeah. So, and then who's the one who's actually signing the agreement?
So it depends. I have two products. I have like a B2B consulting product where companies would bring me in as a coach trainer. And then I have account executives that may pay out of pocket for my other like B2C product, which is a community coaching program.
Which one makes most of the money right now?
Right now, the B2B side, the B2B side, but I'm trying to hedge that risk by building out the B2C side more.
Omar, there's some familiarities in here, so maybe some stuff will help you too. One, in a B2B company, AEs don't buy anything, like more or less anything. So that's something to recognize. If you're selling B2B, an actual sales rep is not buying something. The manager or likely a higher up is the one who's actually buying it for everybody. And so I think the bottoms up motion of like SDR and AEs into sales is just really inefficient, to be honest. And so on the B2B product that's making most of your money, that gets a VP of sales or somebody like that is signing the deal where you're doing coaching and training and it's making most of the money. Like that's what I would focus on. I think that the like media company, AE, self-service, like whether it's a community for $100 a month or a course for $497 that you sell to AE that you go for scale, that it's just an entirely different business model, and it's going to, I think the likelihood of success is much lower. I'll just call it how I see it. And so it's fine if you have all the materials and you want to have that as a hedge, but I would prioritize the B2B side, given that it's already being successful for you and it makes a lot of logical sense why you would make more money that way. And then I think like the common sales tip is not going to resonate with a VP of sales. Like your content should be, here is how you run a high velocity SMB sales machine for companies that have 10 to 50 reps. Like that's what the content should be. You fill in the blanks of the numbers and things like that, but the content should be around that. Who are you selling to? VP of sales. What do they care about? Getting their SMB motion to be like hot, scalable and cost efficient. How do we do that? Through this offer training that I offer. With the like 30 seconds of context you provided me, that would be the direction that I would go.
Thanks, Mor. Great question. That's a really great question and topic too. Like ultimately, a lot of times this is the case. You've got the user who can champion the product and is the one using it day to day that you could create content for, but they're ultimately not the one who's making the purchasing decision. And a lot of times the person making the purchasing decision has a lot of people creating content or trying to get that person's time. And really, they're not going to interact with, your product, your service, your company too often. They're going to have, the other department or the user. So I can understand, like, that's a problem for a lot of people, I think, to kind of wrap their heads around who should I be creating content for ultimately, the end buyer or the user who's going to, be in and using the product every single day.
And here's the tricky part. When you market sales tips to account executives and SDRs, you're going to get a fuckload more engagement.
Exactly.
The engagement metrics are going to tell you that that's where you should go. But the business result is showing you to go in a different direction, clearly by the success that you've had or the revenue differences. And so it's just a really key point for people that like, the engagement metrics will push you to the broadest, widest topics and audience, not necessarily the thing that's going to get you the most money. And not to say that money is everything, but we're in this game for business. Like money is a good indicator of success in this case.
Totally. Great point. Ahmed, if you want to come up, you had a great question here. I think everybody could learn from.
I have a question around operationalizing a team. So we have a social media manager, we have a videographer, we have a video editor, but we're all kind of doing our own thing. It's not totally unified under like, here's our exact LinkedIn content strategy. So I just was asking if you guys had any advice for kind of aligning everyone on the same plan when you're starting from scratch.
I mean, Eric, I record the content, but then you do all of it. You want to just talk them through what the high level process is and how we break down the long form audio, video, and then into short form defined formats and the channels that we choose. Like,
Yeah, for sure.
it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So basically, the best way to think about this is having 3 distinct roles for the full execution. It is the thought leader. So obviously, in this case, like that's Chris. There's the content architect or your content marketer, whatever kind of the producer, whatever label you want to put on that. Ideally, in my opinion, this person should be internal. Sounds like you've got some people on the team who can fill that role. And then you've got the production team or the editor, the editing team, what have you. Those can be internal or external. The content architect is bridging the gap between the thought leader and the production team. So they're the ones helping figure out and bubble up what are the things we're talking about this week? What are the topics? Are there going to be guests? What's the prep that the thought leader needs? All in an effort for the goal for the thought leader to be able to show up, maybe do a little bit of prep before, the content creation, the recording, what have you. Do the recording and their work is done. After the recording, the content architect then facilitates that over to the production team with their notes on what should be done, if anything, outside of the standard execution of that. Whether there's like moments from that were more important or less important, should be edited out, need to add things, what have you. And then the production team takes it, depending on where and how you're publishing it, they create all the media from it. So they'll create the long form for YouTube. You can also embed on the website. I think that's actually a really strong play with a YouTube embed, by the way. I think is the best way to do that. I wouldn't, Wistia and all those other platforms are good, but the benefit of a YouTube embed is when people and the people who are on your website are typically prospects. So when they click on that basically cookies them in essence on YouTube. So the next time that person goes on YouTube, on the For You page, more of your YouTube content will show up for them. So you've got a bit of a content viral loop there simply by embedding your videos on YouTube on your website. So then the production team will create all the assets. Then they put it in a repository for the thought leader. So in this case with Chris, what we do is we put it in a Google Doc. We label it all. We try to make it easy for him to search, based on what the content type is, the topic is, and what that recording session was, so that he doesn't necessarily post them sequentially, but based on what's most important for him in what he's thinking about, what he wants to, talk about. There's a stream of easily searchable, indexable content that he can pull from for either additional resources to post from or the inspiration to post from. So I think you can have one or multiple people in each of those roles, but like thinking about it that way, I think is helpful.
Thanks. I appreciate it. It's helpful.
Yeah, totally. Great question. Matthew, if you want to come up, I think this is a good question as well, because there's obviously like, in B2B, there's a heavy SaaS play for this as well, but this is very relevant for services companies as you have, Chris, and as I have, and many other B2B services companies. So Matthew, if you'd be able to jump up and ask your question.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, I'm on an exercise bike, I'm a little sweaty, but I love it. Chris, your content's just amazing. Love it. I'm totally in a different industry, service-based. We have a couple hundred employees nationwide, 11 markets. We are a subcontractor and we sell to contractors. That's our main customer. We do jobs. We have done jobs for like Facebook and actually like Fortune 500 companies, but we're selling window film and we install the window film. We sell the window film. We do it for energy savings. We do it for safety for schools. Schools are a big seller to us because they're giving grant money all across the country, for school shootings, and our film makes the glass stronger so people can't just shoot the glass and walk in. So it's a great product. But when I listen to your stuff, it's like, we don't have ARR and we're not software. It's service based, right? So I need to get to these contractors so they, so we bid a job and they could, trust us and choose us for the job. We're selling to just, so we're like a subcontract selling. So I'm trying to think how, and other service-based businesses, how does your content or how does it translate to my type of business? Because I love your content. It makes sense. but I'm trying to see how it translates.
Totally translatable, and I'm going to break down what I would do if I were you. But like the ARR versus revenue and recurring business, it changes like some of the things related to like how much you can invest in marketing and how much it can cost you to acquire a customer. But the core principle of like, we sell something to this defined set of people and we need them to know about what we sell and want to buy it, like that's universal. And then it's just about how much money can we spend based on how much our product costs to be able to get this person to be aware and want to buy. That's the only limitation. And so like for you, like I would go hard TikTok. I would put the film on the glass. I would have like in the first second shooting a gun, it not going through the glass. Like there's a lot of things that you could do in the first second to show that product and tell that story. And then I would find something that works organically on TikTok and take it directly and run it on media on the LinkedIn video feed with ads. And I would then run it 2 accounts if you're selling it primarily B2B, but I would go for the big consumer awareness play first in this case. And then I would bring what worked, the creative that worked over there, into a more narrow space to the metas and schools and other things like that.
Because I don't think contractors are on TikTok, but they may be on LinkedIn, project managers may be on LinkedIn. So you're saying do the content on TikTok and then put it on LinkedIn?
Well, I mean, I think most people don't even know what you have exists right now.
Right. Exactly.
And I think that if a lot of people knew that it existed, they would be like, wow, that's pretty cool. I'd never heard about that. That was my reaction. Like, I'd never heard about that. That sounds like a good idea for business. I could see how people would be able to, a school would be able to justify that, or a company would be able to justify the ROI on that. Like, I get that. So figuring out how to tell a simple story to anybody to say, wow, this stuff that goes in the glass is hyper valuable.
Right.
And then just taking that and just putting it in front of the businesses that matter. I think that it forces you to just tell a really simple story that a lot of people would get. And I think that in your marketing strategy, that's what you need.
Education. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Even just to the level of the basics.
Yeah.
And then once you have that creative, you can break it down and you can like pull that hook out and say, hey, did you know that blah, blah, blah school district did this in 9 of their schools? Here's what people are saying about it. You can make it more specific or verticalized or more like quote unquote salesy later. But I think just getting people to understand this exists and think, hey, this is cool. I think that would be the first step. And I think TikTok would be the best place to figure out how to tell that story.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Love it. Great question, Matthew. One thing I wanted to mention real quick, Andrew, you asked a question about, do you need to post the vertical video in a specific way for it to appear in the new video feed? The answer is no. I don't have the video feed on my personal LinkedIn app. I just post vertical video 9:16, and then it gets picked up by the video feed. So I'm literally posting it on the desktop LinkedIn platform and uploading it vertical, and then it gets pushed into the video feed that way. So nothing special you need to do for that. Yeah, Chris, to wrap up, man, this is great. Appreciate everybody joining. Appreciate your time, Chris. Like anything you think we didn't cover that'd be good to kind of leave people with, either for a specific, practical takeaway or like, inspiration wise.
I assume that a lot of people in here are either founders or like social media or content marketers. And I think that there's this weird dichotomy between how critical and how impactful social media content can be for a business versus how it's viewed by the executives, like a CFO or a chief revenue officer inside of companies. And I think there's a gap between the actual value and upside versus what people see is happening today. And I think that's up to all of us to not make social media a check the box internal PR. Let's just post something because the HR department wants to this week, or because, and really focus it on delivering against the core business outcomes that we have. Like the example we did, like that could 100 or more people doing this glass installation, one TikTok video that gets 10 million views could fundamentally change their business forever. And on LinkedIn, you don't have that like such massive reach and things like that. It just doesn't work the same way. But there's such an opportunity with this that I think it's up to all of us to figure out how to really shape our social media strategy and content around the business objectives and be able to communicate at that level is something that I'm trying to help with, like frameworks and stuff, because it's hard to do. But appreciate all of the work that you all do. Hope this was helpful. Eric and I now do this once a month, so feel free. Eric will link this in a follow-up or something to come to the next one. We've done like podcast production and LinkedIn, and it'll all be around social media or content marketing. So feel free to join us again next month.
Totally.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Yeah, thank you all. I'll email out the recording to everybody as well. So thanks everybody for the time. We'll see you all at the next one.